Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Gibbon episode 32. Kayla Johansson, who's a real life gold miner. But before we get on to that podcast, I apologise for the slight delay in getting a new episode out. I think we've had about a month off. The reason for that was obviously we went down to the stalking show. I think I got 4 episodes out before we went down, and the stalking show was fairly manic. I got to see lots of people, meet up with lots of different people, lots of different companies, meet a lot of you, the listeners, which was really good. So you could actually put a face to the name. That seemed to be the most common thing. People going, oh, it's really nice to actually meet you and be able to see what you look like in real life. Obviously, we listened to you in the car or the commute or something like that. So that was really good fun. The show itself was absolutely excellent. It was very, very busy. Saturday was manic. I don't think I stopped, and by the time we actually made it back to the hotel, I think it was getting on for 9 o'clock at night. I think we just managed to get a meal. However, obviously Sunday came and it was a bit quieter, definitely quieter, because realistically, I think the show was packing up probably before the end time on Sunday. So I don't know what had happened there, but it was a very, very good event to go to, and lots of really interesting kit and product that was on display for people to use. Some of your classic stuff, from the knives to a lot of the new tech that was coming out. So you could see some of the thermal binoculars and stuff like that some companies are offering, and including some of the latest rifles and other things that were available to buy. I didn't really get a chance to record any live podcasts because obviously I was helping Alex out at Hunter-Gatherer stand, and going around and talking to people and catching up with people. It was very difficult to actually sit down and get anything recorded. We did record one podcast with David, the CEO of the British Deer Society, and that will be coming out after this one. So watch out for that one. It's an interesting look at the future of deer stalking within the UK. Anyway, I've taken this one slightly on a different route. This isn't a hunting, stalking podcast. It's still about the wilderness, but it's one of those things that has always interested me, gold mining and prospecting. It's a funny one. You think, oh, you can't do that in the UK. Well, actually, in parts of Scotland, you can actually go gold mining. I know we've done it. I took my son there. I remember driving back up when we were first moving up here from Leicestershire, and somewhere in the borders, we phoned up the place saying we're going to be late, but are you still open? They're like, oh yeah, we close at 5, and that gave us like 25 minutes to get there. We rocked in with 10 minutes to go, and they were brilliant. My son and was allowed to sort of pan a bit of fake gold to start with, but we got talking to them, and there is actually gold in particular rivers, and you can get sort of licenses to actually go out there and prospect. So it was an opportunity that I managed to take, was to get a real life gold miner and prospector. And it's slightly different than somebody that just digs up with a machine. Kayla actually uses a dredge and basically submerges herself in the water and hoovers up, let's just say, all the debris that's on the bottom of the riverbed. And in that, this dredge is basically like 2 pontoons and a bit of a wash plant, what you'd call like a washboard through the back of it, and all the material runs across that, and there's like little gaps in sort of the mesh that they call riffles that actually catches the gold deposits. And yeah, she's now turned this into a full-time living. Has been seen on like hit TV shows like Gold Rush Whitewater, but as well as that, she's obviously a full-time prospector. She's got a YouTube channel that you can go and look at. She's just started getting into making YouTube videos and things to help people understand what she gets up to. And yeah, I just had the opportunity to grab her and throw her on an interview, and I think you'll all enjoy it. Anyway, sit back, relax, do whatever you're doing, whether it's the commute to work or just chilling out in the evening, and have a listen and let me know what you think. Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Gibbon podcast. Today I've got a very special guest. If anybody's watched anything like the Discovery Channel, we have got Kayla from Whitewater. That's where you'll know her from, but she actually has a lot of other things going on. Hello, how you doing, Kayla?
Hey, how are you? I'm doing good.
Good. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show, and hopefully we can enlighten people as to the things you do and how you got into gold mining and all the rest of it.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I've done quite a bit of gold prospecting. I started about 18 years ago when I was 17 years old.
Okay.
Uh,
What sort of what got you into that really? How did you get into gold prospecting?
um, I've always been like really interested in like old-timey type of stuff, like going and exploring old ghost towns and ghost mining towns and old mine shafts and stuff with my dad when I was a little kid. Like I
Oh,
remember
okay.
at 8 going in old mine tunnels and stuff with my dad. So I think that kind of sparked the original like seed. But when I was about 17, I was living in California and I used to see all the guys out there. This was before they banned gold dredging in California. And I'd
Oh,
see all
okay,
the
right.
dredging and panning and stuff. And it really sparked my interest even more. So I started playing around with gold panning. And then I found out that my grandfather, who lived in Arizona, was also into gold prospecting and like pan gold on the weekends for a little bit of extra money and stuff here and there. So I went and stayed with him for about a week and he taught me a little bit more about panning, and then it just became kind of a life obsession.
I suppose everybody has a hobby, and yeah, if that's it, at least your hobby actually potentially has the chance of actually earning you money rather than most people's hobbies that seem to cost them a lot of money.
Well, it wasn't that way in the beginning.
Right.
But now, yeah, I do it full time, spring through fall. And then I turn the gold that I find into jewelry, so it allows me to make money on it all winter.
All right. Okay. So you don't actually just melt it all down and just go and weigh it in and get a wad of cash. You'll take that gold, those nuggets and things like that that you actually find, and make them into pieces of jewelry.
Yeah, so I make all the chunky pieces into jewelry, and then I save my finer gold and some of my other gold, and I'll make pay dirt and sell gold pay dirt for like people that want to learn how to pan but don't have anywhere to go, or want to teach their grandchildren how to pan in their garage or something like that. So I sell gold pay dirt bags with the smaller gold.
Oh, that's really cool. No, I think I've seen those because you've got them up on your Instagram feed that people can like buy this little pouch of basically dirt, isn't it? And then you can sit there and pan it out and get the gold out of it.
Yeah, so what it is basically it's river gravels. I hand dig it from several of the creeks that I personally mine. So it
Right.
contains gold naturally already. Um, but the amount I can't guarantee. So what I do is then add gold to it as well. So that way nobody gets a dud.
That's pretty cool because that in I live in Scotland and there is actually supposed to be gold in some of the hills up here, and yeah, there's little areas you can actually go and pan for gold, and we had a similar thing, but I'm pretty sure they do like you've done enhanced pay dirt that you actually pan for the kids so that they actually do find something and you don't just get a dud.
Yeah, like there should already be gold in it because like I said, it's straight from the river that I personally mine where I get my gold from. But you might be in a hot spot or you might not be. And since I don't go through that dirt, I don't know how much gold is in it. So I just try to make sure that everybody at least gets a minimum amount.
That's fantastic. So that leads me quite nicely to another question. So why dredging? Because obviously there's a big difference to going out and digging in a field and running it through a wash plant, but you've obviously chosen something that you go underwater and potentially it's quite risky.
Yeah, I feel like there's just more adventure side to dredging and I'm more mobile. I can move around a lot easier. Um, every day is different. Whereas when you're running a wash plant, you might have different little problems every day, but it's not really different. It's really not much different than like working a construction site. You're
I
just
suppose you're
moving.
still washing rocks, aren't you, at the end of the day?
So I don't know. I just find dredging a bit more exciting and more fun for me personally. I know there are a lot of people that like the other method, but I always tell people that I save that method for when my body's broken down and I can't dredge anymore.
I was going to say it must be pretty full on and in sort of endurance actually being running a dredge and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's really physical work. Just being underwater all day, I mean, that's a little bit hard on your body anyways, but then you're moving boulders, moving rocks all day long. And we use these metal baskets. They're like kind of like a milk crate, like a larger
Okay.
milk crate. And we'll fill rocks and then take them back and dump them in a pile so all the rocks are out of the way. And so you're constantly lifting and moving stuff and moving around underwater. So it's definitely a workout. Plus you have weights on. Like I wear anywhere from 52 to, I think the most I've worn was 82 pounds of weight.
Wow. Okay.
So
Yeah.
definitely a workout.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And obviously you're fighting against the water that's flowing past you at the same time as well, I suppose, in some cases.
Yeah, it just depends on the spot. Some spots, and it depends on the time of year as well.
Right.
Some spots can be calmer than others. Some spots, you can barely turn your head sideways or it wants to rip your mask off.
Wow.
And to be very aware of how you're maneuvering your body, because you move certain ways, it makes you like a sail, and that current catches you and just like flips you back and wants to carry you away. So it's a lot of learning how to maneuver within stronger currents, so that you, for one, don't lose your mask and lose your air, and two, don't get blown away. But some of the other areas are a lot calmer, so not really dealing with current as much. And the seasonal part is during the winter or like early spring, late fall, when it's colder. The water's a lot calmer because it's lower. You don't have like all the melt off
Okay.
and
Yeah.
all the rain, stuff like that. That's really bringing the water up. So the rivers are a lot mellower, like this time of year, March, April. So like usually I try to get an early start in early spring to start dredging, because then you can get to some of the harder spots without it being as hard.
Okay. No, that's so you were saying that. So do you work in a team, or are you doing a lot of this by yourself, lone dredging or something like that? Because I'd assume that's quite risky if you're just out there on your own.
I do quite a bit on my own, but I also work with my boyfriend. He's a dredger as well, and we both have kind of our own things going on, our own spots that we work and stuff, but we'll team up. If he needs help, I'll go work with him. If I need help, he'll come work with me. So we're
Okay,
pretty.
cool. So yeah, that I was going to say, because otherwise it's one of those things. I know we have a thing called lone working over here, and it's kind of frowned upon. But you being underwater, working a dredge in the back end of nowhere is kind of it's quite a risky thing to do just for a bit of gold at the end of the day.
It is, but I don't know, it's exciting.
So does that mean you're a bit of a sort of you like the adrenaline kind of thing that goes with it, the risk?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, if I'm in a super dangerous spot where like, you know, I'm in a steep canyon, it could flood or ice dams might break, I'm usually not by myself. Usually that's when me and my boyfriend will work together. But
Okay.
like summer months, if I'm in a calmer area, I mean, I still work fast currents by myself, but I guess there's just different levels of danger.
Yeah, I can see that. I was going to say the other thing, you're obviously talking about working in like the meltwaters and frozen, well, not frozen, but waters at winter time. It must be pretty cold. How on earth do you keep warm in those conditions?
Keep moving.
You just keep moving.
But no, I wear a dry suit, so my body, unless I get a leak somewhere, usually I stay pretty dry, and then I just layer on tons of fleece and wool layers underneath, and usually wear like 3 pairs of socks plus neoprene socks.
Okay, because I think I remember asking you a question really early on, because you were talking about your dry suit. There was something when I first found you on Instagram. There was something about white. You had like this white paste all over your gloves and your knees and things like that. And I remember asking a question about that.
Oh yeah, that's 3M 5200. It's a marine adhesive sealant. It's
Right.
basically like rubber.
Okay.
So I just spread that on the high wear areas, like my gloves, the knees, anywhere that gets a lot of wear and tear.
I
And
suppose moving rocks, you're gonna get a lot of wear and tear at the end of the day. It's pretty rough. That gravel hasn't really seen a lot of. It's not that round and smooth. It's probably fairly ragged and
It depends on the spot. Some spots have a lot of rounded rock, and then some spots have a lot of like really jagged shale. And I don't know if you're familiar with shale, but it breaks off in like sheets, like really sharp shards. And so it just depends on the spot. But you guys rounded rocks like a pair of neoprene dive gloves, you'll wear a hole in them in one day, just moving rounded river rocks.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I can understand why you coat everything in sort of a protective layer then, really.
Yeah, so like a lot of dive gear, it's not really marketed towards dredging. Like it's built for people that are like recreational diving, or they're just free floating. They're not crawling around on the ground, on the bedrock. They're not lifting up and moving rocks all day long, stuff like that. They're just floating around and diving. So
Yeah.
a lot of divers more geared towards that, so that's why I add extra protective stuff, because they don't cut it for what we do.
I was going to say, it's not like you can just walk into a shop and go, yeah, I need to buy some diving gear because I'm going to go and move a load of rocks. They look at you and go, no, we don't make that.
Well, I mean, they'll sell you stuff because they want to make their money, but you got to reinforce it.
Right, fair enough. So that kind of then we move on, because obviously you became known because you joined Discovery. How did you end up working with the team at Whitewater, or how did you end up on the Discovery show?
So it started quite a while ago. I think back in 2016.
Okay.
I was still in North Carolina at the time. I hadn't moved to Alaska yet. And I was dredging in North Carolina, but at that time it wasn't like a full-time thing. It was more of like a hobby. Like
Okay.
every day I was out in the woods digging for gold, panning, dredging, whatever. And one of my friends on Facebook messaged me and said, "Hey, I saw an ad. This show is looking for people for a new gold show, and I think you'd be perfect for it." And at the time, I was like terrified of cameras. I was so camera shy. I hated cameras in my face. Like I was awkward if people wanted to take my picture. Like it was just, I was like, I don't think I'm a good fit for that. And he's like, "No, I think you'd be fine." He was like, "Well, do you care if I at least give them your phone number?" And I was like thinking in my head, well, it's probably nothing. Nothing's going to come of it.
Right.
Or, it's a fake or something. You know how you just have your doubts about stuff online.
No, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, okay, whatever. And I'm thinking in my head, nothing's going to come of this. So no harm. Next thing I know, I get a phone call from someone in the production. And then I had Skype interviews. And then next thing I know, I'm flying out to Nevada to go do a demo shoot.
Oh, cool.
Paul and Wes and Fred and Dustin and everyone. And I was actually supposed to be on season 1. I had the contract and everything. And then at the last minute, I got a phone call that they decided to go with somebody else. So I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So then a few years later, I ended up moving to Alaska on my own.
Right. Okay.
And, I remember talking about going to Alaska in like November, end of November, like Thanksgiving time of 2019.
Right.
And my friend like helped me do a lot of research. So we found a claim to lease and all this stuff. And then at the end of March, I left. So 4 months later, I left and never looked back. So then I was dredging full time here in Alaska, and I get a message from Ryan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he was on the show, I think season 2 or 3. I can't remember.
Right. Okay. Yep.
He was on the show for a while working with Fred, and he messaged me. We had been friends on Facebook since before he was even on the show,
Right.
just through prospecting and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
He messaged me and said, "Hey, I know, the first go around didn't quite go that well or whatever, but would you be interested in talking to Dustin about being on the show?" And I was like, well, I can't make any guarantees that I'll do it, but I'll at least talk to him and see what he has to say. And kind of just went from there.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, no, but I suppose the gold mining community is probably quite small in many ways. Everybody probably knows everybody.
Yes and no.
Okay.
It used to be a lot smaller before all the TV stuff. Like I was gold prospecting before the show Gold Rush even came out. And so it didn't get as much exposure.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I can understand that.
being on, I mean, there had been other shows like Gold Fever and stuff like that, but they just weren't to the big broadcast like Gold Rush.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before that, it seemed to be quite a lot smaller. So people just weren't aware of gold prospecting. Then Gold Rush came out, and then everyone and their brother and their dad thought that they were going to go strike it rich. So it kind of blew up. So watching it from before Gold Rush and then after gold being on TV, you see like a spike in like groups, new manufacturers for equipment, new inventions, things like that. So it did kind of blow up after being on TV.
I suppose it's with the shows like that, the UK market gets them. We had, I think, the big one, Knife Makers over here, doubled when Forged in Fire came out. As soon as that show was released, every man and his dog started making knives.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like anytime something is like publicized, it just kind of blows up a little bit.
That's it. No, so okay, so realistically, you've seen a huge increase in people wanting to get into sort of gold prospecting and thinking they're all going to become a millionaire overnight.
I mean, not everyone thinks they're going to get rich, but then you get those people that get into it thinking it's going to be quick, easy money, and then they start digging and realize it's the exact opposite.
I think as soon as you put a spade in the ground, isn't it? You end up, that's it. You know that money is going to be disappearing very quickly.
Yeah, and then you're buying gear, you're buying dredges, you're paying yearly leases on gold mining claims, you're buying suits every 2 years. It quickly turns into quite the expense. But I mean, you can make good money. It just depends on the ground you're on and your skill.
I was going to say the way that obviously the TV show always gets presented is it's the editing. It's always the suspense. I take it that camp life is fairly. It's not as rushed as it seems to be on a 40-minute channel, on a 40-minute show. It's obviously there's a fair amount of time and effort goes into things, but I'm assuming you're not quite as rushed as it looks like on the TV show.
So like when you watch an episode, they make it out like it seems like you're watching a day or two of work when really it's bits and pieces from probably a week or so.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Time.
Because I was going to say there are some days it's like you've started and there's snow on the ground, and then the next shot there's nothing, and you're like, that all went in one day kind of thing.
Yeah. So what they do is they'll take, they shoot what you're doing all day long every day. But then they'll take bits and pieces like the highlights and like mash them together because nobody's going to sit there and watch 8 hours of a day of 5 months of work, because there's a lot of opening times. It's not exciting for TV. So what they do is they just cut, the highlights, mash them together to make an episode and just edit it that way. So it seems like each episode feels like it's like a day or two of work, but really it's a lot of work that you're not seeing behind the scenes too.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm assuming they're a good. It was a good team and a good experience to do that.
For the most part.
But yeah, obviously you've got a film crew constantly following you about the place. That must be a bit of a pain.
It is. It can be fun. A lot of the people that were on the production crew, they were really awesome, and I got along with most of them really well. So it can be fun, but at the end of the day, you really get tired of talking.
Yeah.
Because you'll say something and maybe you didn't quite word it in a clear way that somebody that doesn't know what you're talking about would understand, or they didn't get a clear audio, or they didn't have the camera on you when you said it, but they liked what you said, and then you got to redo it, stuff like that.
No, I'm suddenly finding this out. I've got a friend that's been putting me on films on YouTube for our deer stalking and hunting and stuff like that. And literally, it's like, can you say that again? Can you explain why you're doing that? So yeah, you've obviously got a camera in your face and you're trying to always give a better answer.
Yeah, basically, like what they say is like pretend you're talking to like somebody in kindergarten that has no idea anything about gold mining at all. Like you just have to explain it like you're talking to a complete newbie that knows absolutely nothing, that doesn't even know what a gold pan is.
Right. Okay.
Like
That's really interesting.
like it was really weird at first because I just talk how I would normally talk about prospecting and mining and stuff. And like I've had to like retrain myself on how to talk and like how to like micro explain things, because as you're working, you're not going to be micro explaining like why you're changing the oil on a dredge motor. You just do it.
Yeah.
So, but when you're doing a show like that, you have to get in the habit of like explaining every little thing you're doing. And it seems really redundant because you might have to explain the same thing like 2 days in a row because they might like the second shot better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I can, and I suppose actually when you're under the water as well, because some of that you're having to have communications through the mics and all the rest of it. I'm assuming that they're not in your ear going, can you just say that again, please?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
uh, and like they want you to like talk about like the rocks you're moving, and when I'm underwater, I'm not really talking. I mean, I might sing stupid songs to myself underwater, but I'm not really under there talking unless I find a really good nugget, and then there's a lot of cuss words that come out.
Fantastic.
Down there, like, oh, I gotta move this rock now, and oh, gotta choke her on this. I'm not really doing that on my own underwater, so you have to like get used to talking about things that are going on which you wouldn't normally be talking about in like day-to-day mining.
Yeah, so that's the only bit that I can't work out is, do you, because obviously you guys are down there with an airline and all the rest of it. Is there a cameraman next to you, or is it all just done off GoPros and stuff like that?
The majority of it is done on GoPros, so we wear, like I was wearing like a chest mount, and then you have one attached on your mask. Sometimes they have a little mini camera inside the mask, and then they get those weird eyeball shots. um, but then on really good days, like a lot of times when we're diving, the water's not that clear, so it doesn't make sense for them to send the underwater cameramen down.
Right.
But on days that we get good water clarity, um, and there's something new going on, like maybe we hit bedrock or we have this huge boulder we've been dealing with that's finally going to get moved that day, and the water's clear and he can see it, then sometimes he would get down and do some actual recording with a big camera.
Okay, cool. Right. Okay. So let's move out the water now and let's move up to camp, because obviously the camps look fairly basic. How are they to live in? Are they comfortable, or are they really basic?
Well, they're pretty fairly comfortable. I mean, we each have our own tent, and they're not just like little tiny camping tents. They're like the 8x10 canvas wall tents.
Okay.
So
So
it's
you
like
don't, yeah, you kind of don't get to see that in the show. It's like you're all sat around like this tiny little room with a couple of sofas, and that's kind of it, kind of thing.
that was like our meeting area. But
Right.
we each have our own tent. Um, it's really not that bad, but see, I'm used to camping and used to roughing it before the show. So for me, it's not that bad, but maybe other people might think it would be. I don't know.
No, it's just interesting to know, really, because obviously, yeah, as you say, when you guys are out there, it's fairly remote. I'm assuming in some of those locations, it's not like you can just pop to the shops.
Yeah. When I worked on McKinley Creek, the camp that we had there was accessible by like a four-wheeler. There
Right.
was a road coming up, but it wasn't like a normal driving road. Like you couldn't just take any vehicle up there. But we had like the side by sides and stuff like that. So it's like
Cool.
off the trail. So it was accessible. So if there was something that was absolutely needed and somebody had to go down the mountain, you could. It's just takes a while.
Yeah, because
Um,
obviously that's always the thing you never really know about. It's they make it out with like the aerial footage and all the rest of it that you guys are literally in the middle of nowhere. And obviously, yeah, the last season when you've got these jet boats, you pretty much are in the middle of nowhere.
Of them really are pretty remote. It's just the access to McKinley was a lot easier because you were able to drive if you had an off-road vehicle. Um, but it still took over an hour to get to town.
Right.
So, I mean, it was still out there in the wilderness. But then the second year when I worked on Nugget Creek, that was a lot more remote because you couldn't drive there. Only early in the spring when we drove that big army truck and that Jeep and the other stuff up there was because the water was still low because everything was still kind of frozen.
Okay.
But during the summer, the only way in was either helicopter or airboat.
I was going to say, I'm assuming most of the crew and supplies and stuff like that, Discovery are bringing in helicopters for you. They're not riding airboats up the river, are they?
Riding the airboats, no. So they have
No.
deliveries, shipments come in with the helicopter rides. So there was a big like a food tent, like a mess hall where everyone would eat. And so they'd bring in the food for the week. I think bring in food twice a week or something. But one thing you got to be careful out there with a lot of food is all the bears.
Well, that was my next question for you. Obviously, you're in the middle of nowhere and you've got nature around you. So I'm assuming bears, other things just wandering in and out of camp is quite common.
Yeah, I mean, we saw quite a few bears. I remember eating dinner one day, and I actually have a video of it on my phone, but there was a big grizzly crossing the river right in front of our
Wow.
eating. I was
That
just amazed because he just totally ignored us. Care about the food smells. I guess he was on a mission or something.
and that's not caused you any, well, even in your day-to-day dredging and things like that, wildlife doesn't come in and cause you many headaches or hassles.
I haven't had any I haven't had any major issues with them. I have had a bear break into my truck and steal a bag of dog food though.
That's pretty
So that,
crazy.
and then last year at the end of the day, at the end of my work day, I was panning out my concentrates after I cleaned out the dredge. And I always bring my dog mining with me. If it's pouring down rain, I don't, because then she's just sitting out there in the rain all miserable. But as long as it's not pouring down rain, I bring my dog mining with me a lot. And I usually tie her up next to where I'm working. And I was panning out my concentrates and I was like facing the dredge. So my back was turned to the upstream portion of the river. And all of a sudden she's just going berserk, like full Cujo attack mode. And I turn around and like 60 to 75 feet away from me was a grizzly bear.
Wow. Okay. That's close. Yeah, yeah.
It was pretty close, yeah. And the weird thing was, like, because of the current and everything going on, I could hear the bear. So
Right.
if my dog hadn't alerted me, it could have just snuck up on me. That's why I like having her. She's like my alarm.
I was going to say that's a pretty big risk to be out there and literally, if you didn't have the dog, as you said, it's yeah, that's it. Good night kind of thing, isn't it? With a bear behind you.
Yeah, and my dog's not a big dog. I mean, she's medium sized. She's about 40 pounds. But
Right.
man, she's feisty.
Well, so-
Thinking double, she don't like you or what's going on, man, I wouldn't want to mess with her. But she just went in full blown charging mode to that bear, and that bear just turned around and took off. He wanted nothing to do with her. She was like a
well,
little friend.
fantastic. Well, at the end of the day, though, that's kind of protection. So because that was the next question. I know that a lot of people, obviously, when you're out there, people will carry sort of a firearm or something. Is that something you carry, or do you just use the dog?
Oh yeah, I bring a gun with me every single day.
Yeah.
So after the dog chased the bear off, I shot off 2 rounds, not at the bear, but in the general direction, just to add extra scare factor.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Actually went away.
No, that's kind of what, yeah, because it's one of those things I don't, it's one of those things we probably they don't show, but I was going to assume that there's plenty of firearms kicking around just because the nature of the wilderness you're in. At the end of the day, yeah, it's a pretty scary place in some cases.
Oh yeah. Yeah, in my tent when I was working on Gold Rush, in my tent I always had a 12 gauge shotgun right next to me. Just in case. Oh, I mean, you're just in a canvas wall tent. If a bear wants to get in there, all they gotta do is swipe it, rip it open, and get in.
I was going to say it's yeah, you don't have much protection at the end of the day with a piece of canvas between you and a bear.
Not, I mean, it's like a false sense of security just not being able to see out, but it's not gonna protect you.
I was going to say it's kind of it's that ignorance is bliss. Ah, look, there's a canvas wall here. I'm perfectly safe kind of thing.
Yeah, that out of sight, out of mind type of factor.
Yeah, that's it. No, absolutely. Oh, so obviously, if well, when you're out, and obviously with the when you've got the production cast around, food's probably pretty good. But when you're out in the woods by yourself, I'm assuming you have to carry all your own rations in and things like that. And is it still as comfortable a life?
Um, well, I don't mind too far from where I stay.
Okay,
So I just go home and cook food.
ideal. That's a much better way of doing it rather than sort of going, I'm going to camp out here tonight.
Purpose. I found all my mining spots and then I found somewhere to live nearby.
A much better way of doing it rather than yeah, disappearing off up into the hills.
I move twice a year because I live in a different place in the summer than I do in the winter. So I live in a little, they call them a dry cabin, which means it doesn't have plumbed in water.
Okay,
And I don't have electricity.
right.
So I rent later if I want power. So it's still, off grid. It's still kind of rough. It's like a 16 by 16 cabin. So it's not huge, but it's big enough for just me and my three animals.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I live there. I have a wood stove for heat. I have a generator for power, and then I have propane. So it's not terrible. I
I
have
was
a
going to
little
say it sounds pretty comfortable to be honest, and nobody to hassle you.
yeah, it's not bad at all. And then in the winter I rent like a cabin more in town that
Right.
has electricity and, a toilet, a shower.
Oh, fantastic. But at the end of the day, if that works, then yeah, why not? It makes life simple then, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a forever thing. Eventually, I plan on buying some property and building my own cabin.
Right.
But for the time being, it allows me to be close to where I'm working, and it also allows me to save a lot of money so that I can put more money towards hopefully getting property. And then once I get property, I want to set up like an actual workshop where I can have like an area that I can expand my jewelry like equipment, make different styles of jewelry. Right now I'm just doing wire wrapping, but I'd like to melt down my own silver, melt down my own gold, make my own castings and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, so that takes us on because obviously that's quite a big focus of your social media side of things is the jewelry you produce. So let's talk about what how that came about. Was that sort of another hobby, or have the two just worked hand in hand together?
Um, it started out, so I started making jewelry, I think in like 2017,
Right.
and it wasn't anything super fancy. I was just learning. It was just something fun to do. And I would sell a few pieces, but just really cheap because, my name wasn't out there. People didn't know. So in order to sell stuff when you first start, you kind of got to undercut yourself a little bit
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
up, a reputation or whatever. But so I did that for a couple years. And then for about 2 years, I took a break and didn't really make a whole lot because I was really big into like crystal mining, and I was still dredging, but I was also doing like other minerals as well.
Okay.
So that's when I started my Etsy store, was in 2017. And it started out mostly just selling mineral specimens that I was digging. And then I started selling jewelry. But then when I was getting ready to move to Alaska, I closed down my Etsy shop because it was just too much to deal with on top of moving and everything. So I didn't have my Etsy shop going for a little over a year because when I first moved to Alaska, I didn't have any internet access.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't really do a whole lot of jewelry stuff then. It wasn't until my first winter living in Alaska, there's not much to do, stuck indoors a lot, and it snows all the time. And I mean, unless you're into like skiing and stuff like that, which can be fun too, but it's nice to have an indoor hobby for when it's like sub-zero temps.
I was going to say
So
it's probably quite dark and cold up there at some times of the year, isn't it?
yeah, so it depends on what part of the state you're in too, because the farther north you go, the shorter the days are. If you go to way top of the state, you know, they have several weeks where they don't get any sun at all. But
Right.
apart from that, I think the shortest days in December, it's dark until about 10 a.m. and then the sun sets at 3:30 and it's like black outside at 4 p.m. So you really only get like 5 hours of daylight.
Yeah. It's not quite that bad in Scotland, but yeah, I can still work with those hours. I think 9 o'clock in the morning, the sun comes up and it's gone by about 3:30 in the sort of the shortest days.
Yeah. But now, like, we gain light super fast though, because now we're already back to like a 12-hour rotation.
Yeah.
In June, we get no, like, it gets like dusk kind of, like it gets gray outside, but it doesn't get pitch black. Like it's light 24/7. And everyone, when I first moved here, everyone was like, oh, you're going to have to get blackout curtains because it's light at night and you're not going to be able to sleep. Man, I think I just work so hard. When I lay down, I just pass out and all the blinds are wide open.
That's
It does
it. No. I know that feeling very well. My wife says that it's like she has to have a darkened room, but I get home and it doesn't matter. It can be still daylight, and you just go to sleep, and that's it. Job done.
Yeah. Now in the winter, it's a little bit different story. Then I have to have a dark room because I'm not working quite as hard, like physically. I still work hard, but not physically as hard all winter long. So it's a little bit different. My sleeping schedule gets a little wonky in the winter.
I was going to say, because obviously I think we're talking now, and I think we've got a 9 hour time difference between us. So that's the bit that's peculiar. It's morning for you, and it's sort of late afternoon for me, kind of thing.
That is weird.
So I've got a good question here for you. What's kind of been your most memorable day being out on the mining when you've done something, found something? What would that be?
um, I think one of the most special days for me was when I was 22 years old. I was already living in North Carolina. I had moved there from California, but I took a trip back to California to one of the areas where I used to prospect at. And I hiked up, it's the East Fork San Gabriel River. It's
Okay.
just outside Los Angeles area. And I hiked up with my friend Todd. We went about 7 miles back into the canyon and we were out there digging for a couple days together. And he's the one that actually taught me how to do sniping, which is where you're just snorkeling and waving away the lighter material. And the first day he taught me sniping, I found my first gold nugget, which is actually the nugget that I wear on my neck.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
I had found gold prior to that, but nothing big.
Right.
So like I just remember like sniping and like the sun was hitting the water just right and it was laying on the clay layer and the sun beam just came right in. It was just like glowing underwater. And I just remember I was just so excited because before that I had found like flakes and I was finding gold, but just hadn't found anything that big. But it's 2.3 grams, so it's pretty good size.
I was going to say that's and to be able to just see that and pick it off the bottom, that's got to be, yeah, that's got to be a highlight of the day, really, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a fun trip. I think we were just hand digging. Mostly we were sluicing, but we did a little bit of sniping. In 2 days, the both of us digging, I think we pulled like a third of an ounce just digging with shovels.
That's pretty good going. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it was pretty fun. I mean, that was early on. I had been prospecting for almost 5 years at that point, but just small time.
Have there been any times where you're like, why am I doing this? Why don't I just go and get a day job and earn some money?
No, because I hate day jobs. I like what I do. I mean, you're gonna have bad days, but that's with anything.
I was going to say, because that was the next question. So what's been sort of one of the worst days that you've been out there?
Um, one of the worst days, there's a couple of them, but I think when I was working at McKinley Creek, that first season I did on Gold Rush, at the very end, the last dive, I did the last dive of the season, and just coming to the realization that you've worked 4 months on a hole and didn't hit bottom is
Right.
really disheartening. Like, you just feel defeated.
Yeah.
And to put much work into something to not be able to finish it is like really disheartening.
I,
Um,
I was going to say, because it seemed to be, I don't know whether it was something obviously that Fred and Dustin seem to have trouble with, because I think that's always been the story for them, from how Discovery's always portrayed it, that they've always dug a hole and they've never really quite ever got to the bottom of it. When they first started at like Porcupine Creek and things like that, they would digging and they never found the bottom.
well, the areas that are chosen, when your bedrock is over 20 feet deep, it's not feasible to really make money with the dredge because you have to go through so much overburden that doesn't pay.
Yeah.
Ideally, I like to stay in areas that are under 10 feet in depth, because the less time you spend going through overburden and the more time you spend on the pay layer, which is usually more towards the bottom, the more payoff you get from it. It's more worthwhile. So that's one thing with the show that is a lot different than how I do stuff in real life.
Do you think, well, I was good, that's it. Do you think the show has kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, has kind of dictated how they do their dredging, or would they do it differently if there wasn't a camera crew following them round?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, it's TV, isn't it, at the end of the day?
And danger sells. So if people think your life's in danger or they see drama, stuff like that, that sells, unfortunately. But so a lot of reality shows, they kind of feed off of that.
Which is a shame, really, because actually it would be really nice to see sort of the real side of it, because actually it really is quite interesting, and to actually see when you do dig down and find stuff that, yeah, that's the bit that, but I suppose it's a target audience, isn't it, reality TV?
Yeah. The thing with reality TV that I've always found kind of weird, especially after working on a show, is like some of the people that watch it just take it as if it's like a documentary, like, oh, well, they showed it, it must be 100% how it happened. And I'm like, they think because it's called reality TV that it's actual always reality. What they don't realize is like reality TV is just like the name of the genre
Yeah.
based on reality. Not, it doesn't mean that everything happened exactly to the T how they show it on TV. There's a lot of
No.
editing into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite excited though, because I think you've now finally decided you're going to start throwing up YouTube videos of actually doing stuff. You're obviously feeling more confident behind the camera, so there's going to be more actual you gold mining and showing things that you're doing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm really new to all like the video stuff on my own with the editing and all that. So don't expect anything super high quality just yet because I'm learning as I go. But I am starting to release like some short videos. I think the longest one I have right now is only like 3.5 minutes long. Um, but I'm just gonna do like some short videos on things that I do, me finding gold, and then I might do like some repair videos, like if I have to switch out a pull cord on a motor or stuff like that, or do an instructional video on panning, stuff like that, because I get a lot of people that ask. So I'll probably do a video like on the stuff that I put on my suit that we discussed earlier, because I get a lot of people that ask me that. So I'll probably do a video on that. Just more explaining versus like selling drama. And
But that's really, I think that's really cool, because actually, unfortunately, to get people on the podcast and stuff like that, I have to fire out loads of messages, and a lot of people, probably you don't see it, you probably get that many messages. I remember trying to get hold of somebody, and the only reason I managed to get into contact with them was they had their socials hacked and they started a new account, so they had only 42 followers. So I literally pinged the message at that point and I appeared, and it was like, yeah, we can do it, we can do a podcast. But it's one of those crazy things, because obviously you must get inundated on a daily basis with people asking questions and stuff like that.
yeah, I do get a lot of messages. So I try to answer people as best as I can. but I do prioritize like business messages. So like if people are asking about my jewelry or my shop or, stuff like that, or wanting to do podcasts like what you messaged me, I try to prioritize those type of messages actually. Because then I get a lot of random people that just message me, hey, and that's all it says. And I'm like, you gotta have, there's gotta be more context to a message for me to answer it. I'm not just gonna say, hey. Not
Yeah.
saying like pick up or anything. Like I will talk with people, and if they have a question, I'll answer it. But like I don't have time to answer every little message that people just want small talk.
Yeah.
Like some people, no meaning behind the message, they just want my attention. And so it's like, if I spent that much time answering every single little hey message, I would never get anything done.
Well, I think that's the problem, isn't it? Social media is wonderful because actually everybody gets to see what you're doing, but yeah, you'll end up inundated with people who just want to have small talk to talk to you because they've seen you on TV and they think you're going to be able to answer some menial question for them.
Yeah, like I try my best to answer questions, and I try my best to engage with people, but I just don't have time every single moment of every day to answer every single message that people send me. So I try. It's not that I'm trying to be rude and ignore people, but I do have a lot going on outside of Instagram and Facebook. So I don't think people realize, they just think, oh, it's just one message, but they don't realize that I'm getting thousands of others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much this is probably going to be my last question. What's the future hold for you now?
Well, I'm still mining full time from spring through fall, so I don't see that ending anytime soon, I plan on sticking with dredging until my body just decides it can't do it anymore, and then I'll probably move on to some other sort of mining.
Cool.
Gonna continue my jewelry business. I own my own mining claims, so
That's pretty cool.
right now the main focus is just working on mining and my jewelry and saving up money to buy property so that I can set up a workshop where I can work on my mining equipment and work on my jewelry business. And I want to start cutting stones again. I was learning how to cut stones before I moved, and I don't own any of the equipment. So eventually, once I get a workshop built, I want to get like a rock saw and cabbing machines and stuff like that.
Oh, fantastic. So, because that you just touched on that earlier, you talked about you mine gems. Is that in the same area that you mine gold, or do you have to go somewhere else in the country to find gems?
Usually in the winter, I'll take a trip for a couple weeks and go dig elsewhere where there's no snow.
Right.
Yeah.
So like most of the miners, you disappear out of the cold area and you go somewhere a bit warmer for a bit.
But it's usually really short because I stay in Alaska year round, but I might leave for like last month I left for like 2 weeks. I went to Nevada, Arizona, California, and dug like crystals, amethyst, agates, jaspers, calcinies, all kinds of stuff.
Cool. Well, I think that pretty much brings us to a quite a nice point to sort of to round this podcast up. So thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been brilliant.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. I do apologise for some of the audio quality in there. I would assume that Kayla was on a satellite link and there was a slight delay when some of the audio was going through. So I think when I was speaking, sometimes it overcut her audio and things went a bit blank. But anyway, I think you got most of it and it's pretty good considering there was, I think, a 9-hour time difference and she's in Alaska and based in the north of Scotland. Anyway, stay tuned. As I say, we've got more exciting guests to come. Some more announcements to come out for the Outdoor Gibbon. Obviously, there are things you can buy now. There are beanie hats. There are podcast stickers. If you want one of those still, just drop us a message and we'll get one in the post to you. We've now got them in parts of Europe. There's one in Alaska. So all is good along those lines. Yeah, just keep listening and thanks very much for all the support.